Our plugin of the week is the Neve V-Comp. And so those of you guys who know me that know that I really love this compressor. It's actually a compressor that is, or this plugin is modeled after the Neve 2254 compressor. And so I actually, we didn't get to the mix map here, but I have it over here. There's a couple variations of it. So this is one of them here. That this particular one is modeled after, because there is a version, the 2254A, which actually has a threshold. And this modeling is after the one that doesn't have a threshold. So essentially, your input gain, it's like a fixed threshold, and your input gain determines the actual gain reduction. So it's slightly different in terms of the way a typical limiter works, where you would have a threshold control, which would determine when you start to have your compression. I mean, you'll see a lot of vintage compressors, like the 1176 that has no threshold control on it, like that type of thing, where it's the amount of input gain that surfaces or goes through a fixed threshold kind of thing. And that's more or less what it's modeled after. So you don't have an input control on that, but you need to have one here, and basically what amounts to a makeup gain. And although the surface controls are different looking, and that probably has to do with getting the licensing rights to make it look the same, because there are a lot of companies that make variations of this, and they sort of can make it look a little bit like, but not so much like. It's kind of like they didn't even do like that thin vertical meter that they have here, right? Which is giving you these little arrows here. These little metal arrows that go up and down to give you gain reduction or output level or input level. So there's some things that they definitely changed up in this. One is you can still do the input, gain reduction, and output. You'll find that the gain reduction is always going to be kicked in. Like you almost have to set the input gain to like -20 or something in order to not get any kind of compression. But what's interesting here is that this is actually it's a DBFS meter, even though it's showing up as a VU meter with the ballistic. So that's kind of the way that it shows when you're looking at it from the output and input level. And then the gain reduction is more or less like an averaging kind of thing. So what's really cool about this compressor, it has a bunch of characteristics. One, they actually have the harmonic distortion characteristic modeled so that you can decide what percentage of that you want to add in, and that adds some warmth and depth into it, especially in the low mid-range. And so generally what I love about this compressor is that it's what I call kind of it's a type of compressor that's really good at like what I call mid-band compression. It's something that kind of pulls like a whole sound together and really makes it cohesive. And in that respect, it can be really good on things like vocals. It can be really good on basses, on guitars. It can be good on the whole mix. So it actually has a lot of things that it can be really good on. And what's interesting is that what'll happen is that as you get or increase the ratio, you actually get the perception of more gain, which is kind of cool. It also has a De-Esser, which is actually built into the original. And what that does is it bypasses the compressor, so it's not in addition to, right? It takes away the compression and then puts the De-Esser in its place. So that's a little bit different. And then you have a limiter, a peak limiter that's built in. And so you can kind of work with this. And the fast setting is extremely fast. Like the slow setting is 1 millisecond for a peak limiter. And then you have like, you could set like an auto release control. So one of the things that's a problem with this is that the general compressor is slow acting, so that when the sounds first kick in, sometimes the compression doesn't kick in right away. So the very first hit that triggers it can kind of pop through a bit. So you have to sort of be careful about that in terms of the way that you work with it. And so sometimes putting the peak limiter in kind of helps in that regard. But just like to feed the whole mix through here, let's see, did I put that on the mix bus? I don't think I did. Hold on one second. Let me just see. I put it, is that the...
It's no mistake that we're here as the plans of love unfold. Coincidence is what we're told.
Okay, so normally what I have is a master fader here. So I'll just kind of add one real quick and throw that on there because I wanted to just put this on the mix bus. And if it shows up, yeah, okay, cool. All right, so I'm not sure why there was never a master, but this should always be a master fader on a mix, right? Okay, so let's see. All right, so I'm going to turn off the...
mistake that we're here as the plans of love unfold. Coincidence is what we're told.
And so what we're going to get here is this could be kind of a fun one here because there's a lot of plugins. But what we do is you get a different unique characteristic sound by each ratio setting.
It's no mistake that we're here as the plans of love unfold. Coincidence is what we're told. How to explain we appeared in this perfect time and place instead of drifting off in space, 'cause we're meant to be.
Oh, I see what's going on. We have a lot of input gain just from the mix bus level. So normally where this sounds good, it's sort of sweet spot in terms of gain reduction is somewhere between -6 and -12 is what I've found.
It's no mistake that we're here as the plans of love unfold. Coincidence is what we're told.
So what's interesting is that even though you get more gain reduction, because it's sort of mid-band compression, it kind of pulls the whole thing together and really makes it, you know, kind of glue together. The limiter, I believe, that's a good question. Is the limiter pre or post compression? I believe it's pre-compression. And it kicks in pretty dramatically, and that would be sort of typical that you would have it kind of pre-compression.
It's no mistake that we're here as the plans of love unfold. Coincidence is what we're told. How to explain we...
And the idea of this is that it's going to add body and warmth. And I think this is probably not the best track for this because there's a lot of that already in here. And so in a way, it's a little bit muddying it up. But the basic idea of this is that it's a really good way of adding or bringing back body and depth and warmth into a mix or to a sound that maybe lacks it. So you see that I go to this a lot because it emulates the transformers made by Neve, which are really, really perfect for that. It gives you this really ballsy, kind of crunchy, low-mid warmth, which is really, really cool. Yeah, it's typical. The question about the limiter is you know, it's typical that the peak limiter is before the compression, because what the idea of the peak limiter is that it prevents the compressor from overworking. So you kind of capture the peaks first, and then it makes the compressor operate more consistently. I used to do sometimes a thing with certain vocalists where I would stage a series of compressors. I would have a limiter first with sort of a high threshold setting, and then a compressor that would be with a lower setting but higher than the last one. And so each successive limiter or compressor would have a lower threshold. And what each one would do is it would perform a certain job. One is to kind of cut down on the peaks. The other would be to bring the sort of medium peak stuff down a little bit. And then the third one, which gives you the overall kind of averaging compression. And that is kind of a, you know, like a cool way of doing it. This is more like sort of a little bit more of a car crusher kind of thing, but it doesn't really sound that way because there's a warmth and not a nastiness or anything to it, which makes it really cool. But the Neve V-Comp is a very cool compressor plug-in by Waves, and actually a really good emulation of that 2254 compressor that I've worked on. In many studios. I think they had some at Electric Lady Studios that were very good. So it's quite a cool compressor, and one that's worth having in your plug-in collection. All right. So anyway, with all kinds of issues and weirdnesses aside, that's our plug-in of the week, the Waves Neve V-Comp.